Sit. Right. Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to another stream. Today we're going to talk to Margot from Ability Rights, which is the same service as Judy Harper had, the Justice Advocacy Service that we talked about with last year. So Margot, can you just introduce yourself and explain the service, please?
Sure, Jeff. I'm pleased to be here with you this morning. So I'm the principal solicitor at the Ability Rights Centre, which is a community legal centre and disability advocacy service that is operated by the Intellectual Disability Rights Service. So as you mentioned, the Intellectual Disability Rights Service, or IDRS, also operates other programs which are separate to ours, and one of those is the Justice Advocacy Service that Judy Harper spoke about last year. So the Ability Rights Centre is a community legal centre. So we offer legal and related services to people with disability throughout New South Wales. So that's people with disability who live in New South Wales or whose legal matter is primarily concerned with New South Wales law. To use our services is free. You don't need an NDIS package to access our services. Throughout 2003, we provided 1,198 different services to clients, and that's across all our different service types. So the majority of those services would be legal advice services, but some support services, so assistance from non-legal disability advocates who provide support to people who have involvement with the legal system. We have, as you mentioned, different types of services. So the main service is our general legal advice service. That's available for people with all kinds of disabilities throughout New South Wales. The types of matters that we help with are quite wide-ranging. So we are often advising on matters where a person with disability has been abused or neglected, either in an institutional setting, in a group home, or in a domestic environment. Matters involving violence, so where people are applying for or responding to applications for apprehended violence orders. We advise on consumer rights, complaints, a lot of complaints matters, so complaints about accommodation providers or service providers. We deal with debt matters, matters involving discrimination, not just discrimination on the basis of disability. Sometimes we're helping people with disability who've been unlawfully discriminated against due to their gender or their age. We help with employment issues. And a lot of our advice and support work is around issues of supported decision making. So where there's an application or a contemplated application for orders to be made for someone to have a substitute decision maker appointed to make decisions about their lifestyle or their healthcare or their accommodation, or to manage their financial and property matters. So basically matters where there are applications for guardianship orders or financial management orders, or matters where those orders are already in place and the person with disability is unhappy and wants a change, either to get rid of those orders or to have some change made to the orders. So it's quite a wide variety of matters that people with disability can approach us to have a discussion about. So we will very often give legal advice to someone, and then in select matters, we can offer ongoing representation to someone with their legal matter. Um, so, for example, a matter where we represented someone that had, I think, quite a significant impact was where we represented a woman with disability who was appearing before the Disability Royal Commission not so long ago. And her case was important because it explored issues facing people with disability who live in supported disability accommodation. Um, the issues related to the rights of women to have a say in who they live with, and to be supported in choosing to have relationships, and to receive proper education about their rights. The issues also related to the use of restrictive practices, and to the challenges that people with disability can confront when they're trying to navigate complaints systems when they're not happy about what's been happening. Um, what we did was we had quite many visits to the client in person to understand her experiences, and to help her prepare her statement for the hearing that she appeared at. We also appeared and attended at the hearing as her representatives. Um, and I think that her statement and evidence was very powerful, and it highlighted the need to improve policies in many support services, and to have better training for staff in those services. We were able to help her prepare her submission responding to the proposed recommendations of the Commission. And we supported her when she had a follow-up meeting with the service provider, where the service provider directly apologised to her for the experiences that she'd had in their accommodation. So that's just one type of example of a matter where we've provided ongoing representation to someone. As part of our general legal service, we have a particular advice service, which is for people with cognitive impairment specifically, when they're under arrest at a police station anywhere in New South Wales and wanting advice on their legal rights while they're at the station. So that is a service that we provide in conjunction with the Justice Advocacy Service that was mentioned earlier in this podcast. So the Justice Advocacy Service provides the non-legal support. Where they can, they send a support person to the police station just to make sure that the person who's under arrest is treated fairly in light of their cognitive impairment, that they understand what's going on at the station as best as possible, and that any problems with communication can be highlighted and hopefully addressed. But what the service also does is try to make sure that the person is put in contact with a lawyer where the person decides that they do want legal advice. And we are one of the services that can be contacted to provide that advice over the telephone. Our lawyers, staff lawyers, but also a very wonderful team of about 17 or 18 volunteer lawyers who help us after hours. We provide that legal advice to the person who's under arrest over the phone, and as I say, it's a 24-hour service, 7 days a week, 365 or 66 days a year. So all hours of the day and night, and on weekends and public holidays. That service is available to people with cognitive impairment when they're under arrest at a police station. So we've got that service as well. We have a couple of more specialised services. So one is where we offer support to parents with intellectual disability specifically, where there's a risk that their child might be removed from their care, or where the child has been removed because the Department of Communities and Justice perceives that there's a risk of significant harm to that child. So we offer legal advice to those parents, and we also offer non-legal advocacy and support to such parents, because often, some of the most important work that needs to be done is helping those parents understand what's going on, but also get access to any supports that they might need to address the department's concerns about risks to their children. And that's where our non-legal advocates do a lot of amazing work in helping those parents. Another specialist service that we have is one that specifically relates to family and domestic violence matters. So where someone is experiencing family violence or domestic violence, we have lawyers who can advise and in some limited cases provide representation for them. And that is statewide, that service. And then again, we have some non-legal advocacy and support service that's available to those people experiencing violence, but that is in a particular geographical area of New South Wales, so it's available for people who are living in the Liverpool, Campbelltown, Camden and Wallandilly local government areas. Yeah. So those are essentially the legal and legal related services. We then have a separate service that is purely a non-legal advocacy service for people who are unhappy with decisions that have been made by the National Disability Insurance Agency. So it's basically where people are seeking a review of an agency decision, or if a person is wanting to ask the Administrative Appeals Tribunal to review a decision of the agency, then we have a couple of advocates who can provide non-legal advocacy and guidance to people who are going through those processes. As well as those direct client services, we offer education services. So we can speak to community groups about the legal rights of people with disability relating to the types of issues that I've mentioned previously. And we can speak to lawyers about working with people with disability, and particularly about working with people with cognitive impairments. And then the final thing that the centre does is to advocate for law and policy reform that promotes and protects the rights of people with disability. And our advocacy is, of course, based on the experiences of our clients. So, for example, we wrote a couple of quite detailed submissions to the Disability Royal Commission about issues of violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation of people with disability living in specialist disability accommodation or group homes, because we have a lot of information resulting from our advice and assistance to people like the client I mentioned previously, who we represented in a hearing at the Commission. So we called for reform to various laws that relate to the situations of those clients. So laws, that should be in place to protect the security of the accommodation of those people living in supported accommodation, and other laws just to really better protect and promote the rights of people living in those situations. And also we called for the creation of an independent complaints body that would have real powers to resolve complaints that are made, and to be able to enforce the the resolutions. Um, so yeah, that's essentially the type of work that the centre does, quite broad ranging. But obviously, our purpose is to work alongside people with disability to achieve our vision of a society where people with disability can fully exercise their rights as valued and respected citizens.
Oh, that's great. You said you were the principal solicitor, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yep. So can you just give us a legal definition between duty of care and restrictive practice? Because sometimes there's an overlap that people get confused with.
Okay. Um, so I guess a duty of care is where you are in a relationship with someone where it can be um, foreseen that you have well, a particular because of your relationship with them, you've got there's an expectation that you would be um, mm, taking some particular care of that person, or and that that needs to be a reasonable sort of expectation. Um, and so you've taken on really some sort of responsibilities. Um, but at the same time, I guess you have to recognize that balanced against that, um, people have dignity of risk, and you have to recognize that any person has, rights to be making their own decisions, and has some personal liberties that they should be able to exercise. So really, um, restrictive practices, it's a very awkward, difficult area. But essentially, you would only be interfering with a person's liberties and freedoms to make their own decisions if there was a real significant risk of harm to that person or to other people, and only the bare minimum steps that were required to avert those significant risks should be taken. So, um, sometimes people are able to actually themselves agree to limitations on their liberties being put in place because they appreciate themselves how sometimes there are risks, and then other times there really needs to be some oversight of any restrictive measures to just make sure that um, restrictive practices are not being used just as behavior control that's not appropriate and not required. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I know it's a really hard thing. I've had yeah, discussions with a lot of people. So I always give the example like if I wanted to go skydiving because I'm blind and I've got a few other issues as well. My support was says no, it's too dangerous for you. And I said, well, I know the dangers. I accept the risk. I still want to go skydiving, and the support says no, I'm not going to help you do it because it's I have a duty of care that you're not at risk, that you're safe, but it's still my choice, and I know the risks. I accept the risk that is my choice. Um, that sort of scenario where they have a duty of care to help their client, but in the same breath they can't stop them from making an informed decision, accept the risks, so long as they don't hurt someone else.
Yeah, yeah, there often is that balancing exercise between the duty of care and the dignity of risk. And as you say, um, a critical factor can be exactly that, whether the person in question has a real understanding of what's involved and the potential risks and what strategies can be put in place to mitigate risks, and then that they've got a good understanding and can make their own decision, albeit within whatever support might be necessary to make the decision, um, to take on the risk.
Yes, yeah. And so you're only based in Sydney, or do you have offices around parts of
So
the
we're a
state?
statewide service, but the physical office is in the Sydney CBD. Um, we do a lot of our work over the telephone or via, teleconferencing, particularly using Microsoft Teams. Um, and we are often um, liaising with not only the direct client, the person with disability, but often with their support circle, whether that's family, friends, professional support workers working with them, like non-legal disability advocates or social workers or other disability support workers. Um, their coordinator of supports if they're an NDIS participant. So sometimes, we're all working together on a client's legal matter. Obviously, for us to be working with supporters, we need consent from the client, but often they're quite happy for that. We do travel, so particularly our lawyer who works with parents with intellectual disability and does some limited representation work in the Children's Court in care and protection matters. He actually is based in the Hunter Valley region, but he does sort of travel up and down the eastern seaboard, really. So
Yeah.
down as far as the Shoal Coast sometimes to represent clients in court. So yeah, it just, we examine obviously what's feasible for us to do. And where we are not directly the legal representative, if a local legal service is wanting some support and guidance from us about effective ways to work with, particularly with people with cognitive impairment, then we are happy to talk to them about the sorts of strategies that we use or the sorts of experiences that we've had. So we offer that kind of support to other practitioners as well.
So if I was, say, with someone else to ring up and they spoke to someone from your office and they form a sort of like a working relationship with that person, do they have that person all the time until their case is finished, till their complaint's
So
finished? Or
yeah, it's a good question. So, the way that we tend to work is when someone first contacts our office, they will be speaking with one of our information and intake officers who will find out a bit about the client and the type of situation they're in and their type of problem and work out whether it's something that our service can help with, and if so, who in our service is best placed to help. They'll then arrange an appointment for the caller to be in contact with, for example, one of our lawyers. So the initial consultation, might be with a particular worker. If the matter is one where the client requests our ongoing help, or where the lawyer, for example, feels that the client does need some ongoing legal representation, then the lawyers have regular meetings, generally weekly, about the new matters of that nature that have come in, and we work out which ones we are able to give ongoing help with and which ones we're not. If we are able to give ongoing help, then it may or may not be the same lawyer as had the initial consultation that will then work with the client. Once we've undertaken to represent someone on an ongoing basis, then the person will have a lawyer who's assigned to their matter, and that will be the person they're working with, unless obviously the person goes on annual leave or something, but they'll have that person will have carriage of their matter, so they've got consistency of legal representation. If we can't help with a matter, but it does clearly require ongoing legal assistance, then we will try to assist the person to find alternate legal assistance. But we do certainly recognise the importance of consistency in legal representation and the legal representative, because, as you say, that rapport between solicitor and client, given that it's such a relationship of trust, is very important.
Yeah. Also, if you have different people throughout the course of the case, then you're having to rehash the same thing over all the time, and that can be something that affects a person with a disability as well.
Yes, absolutely. It can be, particularly given the nature of some of the work that we're doing, it can be very traumatizing for a person to have to go over and over their story. So we do, endeavour to work in a trauma-informed way. I think all of our staff have been through training in working in trauma-informed practice. And yeah, we recognise that repeated need to recount traumatic experiences is extremely, or can be extremely damaging for someone. So we're mindful of trying to reduce the need to repeat and repeat and repeat. But unfortunately, in
Yeah.
some matters, the way the legal system works, I mean, it does require repeated accounts. When you have to provide evidence and statements and then be examined in court and so on. So, that's something we talk to clients about, actually, as, something that they need to decide whether they're prepared to face, just because it is something that the system can demand of them.
Yeah, does the clients have full access to any records that are kept?
So we obviously have, or we have to comply with privacy legislation, and um, and solicitors' rules. So basically, clients can request to have access to records that relate to them, and we would review the records and just work out whether um, providing access to them would impact on the privacy of any third party, for example. Um, and some of the records would be the practices records. So um, people can certainly apply to have access to their records, and they probably would have access to a lot of them, but there may be reasons why some records that relate to them or their matter might not be released to them.
Oh, yes, it's like other people's private information that wouldn't be released. I understand that, but yeah. Also, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. Um, when a person applies to your service, you said it was completely free.
Yeah,
The
that's
three
right.
fees. Yeah.
That's right. Of course, if we do provide ongoing representation to someone, or we carry out legal tasks for someone, there might be disbursements or fees that have to be paid. Um, and so there may be a need for someone to pay the cost of those. It just kind of depends. Sometimes we can get grants, for example, from legal aid to cover the costs of disbursements, like expert reports if we needed a psychological report or a psychiatric report or something on someone. But sometimes we can't get those grants. Yeah, sometimes there may be costs for making an application to a government agency, for example, to get access to the records of that agency that relate to the client and their matter. And there can be fees associated with making those applications. Sometimes there's fee reductions where someone, is at financial disadvantage. But yeah, occasionally, there are fees or costs that need to be paid. But we don't charge our clients for, just for legal service fees. So we're funded to provide our service by various funders. Um, a lot of our funding comes from the Department of Communities and Justice in New South Wales through their Disability Advocacy Futures program. Some of our funding comes from the Federal Department of Social Services through a couple of their disability programs. One is the National Disability Advocacy Program. One is a specific program that deals with NDIS appeals, non-legal advocacy. And we get some funding through legal aid as part of the Community Legal Centres program. So we've got various funding sources, all pretty much government funding, but we are an independent community-based organisation. We're not like a government service. Yeah, so that kind of covers the costs of providing the professional services from the lawyers and the disability advocates.
Yeah, because one of the things that I came across after the report handed back to the federal government was that a lot of times people go through the whole process from the NDIA, and it ends up going to the AAT, and the NDIA will drop it right as it concludes through the AAT. It's sort of like they use that to make it harder for people to take the NDIA to the AAT. Do you find that very much?
Look, I mean, for a process which I think the idea of it was that, people wouldn't necessarily need legal representation and that people would be able to navigate the process themselves. I think, it hasn't worked spectacularly, particularly for people with cognitive impairment if they're not supported by family or other professionals in navigating the process. Pretty much impossible. And certainly, the agency, in our experience, has had really good resourcing to run their matters. So often, there might be a private practitioner who's been retained to run the matter for the agency. There could be a couple of lawyers, there could be a paralegal, there could be a senior counsel and a junior counsel. So they've got, quite a team of people who are involved in running the matter for the agency. And then on the other side, there's maybe a lawyer from a service like ours, or alternatively, the person doesn't have legal representation but has an experienced non-legal disability advocate helping them, but doesn't have legal representation. So, the imbalance between the resourcing of the agency and the individual then gets reflected in the imbalance of the resourcing, for their legal advice and support services. So, I think there is quite widespread acknowledgement that the system for challenging decisions or getting reviews of decisions by the agency does need to be improved to make it more equitable
Yeah.
and accessible.
Well, I remember years ago when I went through the AAT, I had to deal with the NDIA lawyer, and I found that really hard to deal with. Um, it was so off-putting and confronting. I ended up dropping it. I just couldn't do it anymore. They opposed, they made it so hard. And I would have expected a bit more professionalism out of the NDIA lawyer, but that in itself is, in my opinion, probably discriminatory. It's like governments knowing they have deep pockets and people on pensions don't, so they use that financial hardship against them.
Yeah.
And I find I call it financial discrimination. I don't know what your opinion is of that.
Look, well, I guess that's the sort of imbalance I was talking about. It's yes, I guess parties do look at, what's the resourcing of the other party. That they've got lawyers on the other side have their job to do, and their job is to do the best that they can to advance the interests of their client, which is the agency, and they get instructions from the agency and they carry out those instructions. So um, but I think that at the end of the day, the process, as I said, um, hasn't worked spectacularly overall, because there ends up being a backlog of matters that are trying to get through, to get to resolution. People are waiting for a long time to get changes made to plans. Their situation changes in the meantime, and it becomes very difficult to sort out the whole situation. And one would think that that makes it more difficult for the agency, and the people helping the agency, as well as making it difficult for the applicant. So I think a more streamlined process that's much simpler, less legalistic, is better. And I think that that's been fairly widely acknowledged now, and we really hope that there will be some improvement in that, because of course, it's clearly not fair if people are confronted with a lot of legal processes, legalese, and legal argument that they're not understanding, and they have no legal representation of their own. Then how is that a fair process? That's just not. So there needs to be work done to fix that scenario.
Does your service also help people go through the Human Rights Commission?
Yes, we do. Yes, we certainly can. Just depending on the matter and our capacity at the time. But yes, that is something that potentially we do.
So if something goes through the human rights, through the conciliation, and there's no positive outcome, and the person wants to then go through the discrimination laws, do you then help with that as well?
So that's something we'd have to look at, as whether it was feasible for us to do that, given our resourcing. So we are a statewide service. We've got, in the legal team, we've got 7 lawyers. One of those is a casual. One of them is part-time and specifically works on the matters for parents with intellectual disability and the Children's Court. So that kind of leaves 5 of us who have to cover a whole state of people with disability, and we have to keep up our legal advice and task work, as well as the legal education and law reform and policy work that we do. So we have to look at our resourcing and what would be involved in running a matter like that, because just depending on the matter, it can take a lot of a solicitor's time. And as you mentioned earlier, we then have to work out covering of costs and things like that, like fees and so on, that people have to pay in order to run those proceedings. So it is possible we could do it in practice. We don't tend to, but we would look at it on a case-by-case basis. But again, if we had helped someone to go through the dispute resolution processes at the Commission, and that hadn't resolved their matter, then we would be, and they wanted to take it further, then we would explore with them the best way to do that, whether it was by using us or by us remaining involved, but them also using private lawyers who might act on a pro bono basis or reduced fee basis, or whether we would refer them to private practitioners. So it would involve some exploring with the person of their particular situation and matter, but we would help them to make sure that they had some way of taking the matter forward, if that was viable, if they had good grounds for taking it further.
If your organisation can't help, can you find someone to do pro bono work?
So often we can, if the matter has merit. A significant number of the large private commercial law firms now have pro bono programs where the lawyers who are actually in doing that key pro bono work are people who have experience in the relevant types of law. So they're um, not just commercial lawyers who get roped into running a matter that is in an area of law they're not familiar with. Um, yes, or sometimes matters can be referred to legal aid because legal aid does matters that are not just criminal matters or not just family matters. They do other types of matters, which we call civil matters, which would include these types of discrimination matters that we've been talking about. So if a person is eligible for a grant of aid and the matter has merit, then legal aid may be able to take the matter forward for them. Yeah, so as I say, we would explore with the person, who who they might be able to use as their legal representative in the event that we were not able to represent them going forward. And of course, if a person actually has the means to pay for private legal representation, then you know uh, that's obviously an option. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I myself years ago went through human rights with my local government, local council, and the principal solicitor from the DDLC, Disability Discrimination Legal Centre, years ago.
Hmm.
She found me a barrister pro bono to take
Hmm.
it to the federal court, but council backflipped and
Right.
gave up. Yeah, so that was a good outcome. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's certainly a good option for other people who um, might need to take that extra step.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think I sometimes wonder if the general public realizes how much pro bono work is actually done by the profession, the private profession, because there is quite a lot, and at various parts of the profession. So not just those big commercial law firms who have a lot of resourcing available to them, but you know local general practitioners will actually do a lot of pro bono work in different
yeah.
aspects of law, and I think sometimes that that's not widely recognised, and they're not given credit for the amount of support that they do give to the community in that way.
Yeah, I agree. The barrister I had was based in Sydney, and if it had gone to the federal court, the outcome would have been introduced Australia wide. So that's why that barrister was interested in taking my case pro bono. Um, but other people out there just do it for the sake of helping someone out, which is good.
Yeah.
Do you have a breakdown on the type of services that your organiser provides? So is 40% with domestic violence and 20% with the NDIA and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think I'm just having a quick check of our last annual report here. So in the legal service, 21% of our work related to complaints, so whether they were complaints about government or other services, and 21% related to the guardianship and financial management types of matters that I was talking about earlier, the substitute decision making issues. Um, then 13% was related to consumer problems. 12% related to housing issues and neighbourhood issues, another 12% related to domestic and personal violence matters, 8% related to discrimination issues, and then there was a remaining 13% that was a glad bag of other types of matters.
So you have a pretty broad range of things that you cover.
Absolutely, yes. It is.
Yeah,
We're specialist in that we work with people with disability, and we've got particular expertise in working with people with cognitive impairment. Um, but we are generalist in the sense that the legal service really does cover a lot of areas of community, everyday law, legal problems. One area that we don't deal with at all is immigration, and that is because for some immigration matters, you need to be a licensed migration agent to handle the matter, and we don't have any on staff. And secondly, that is a very fast moving area of law, and if you're going to be involved in it, then you really need to stay on top of it. And because of the broad spread of matters that we cover, we just don't have the resourcing for that. So if people do happen to approach us about immigration issues, then there are a couple of other community legal centres that specifically deal with that area of law, so we refer them there to get some help.
Okay. What's your contact phone number for your service? Do you want to put that in the chat yourself, or?
I will give it a go. So our number is whoops, my typing's pretty bad. 02 and then 9265 6350. So that is, I'll just type our name there as well. Ability Rights Centre. Hopefully that works, but yeah, that's the number is 9265 6350. It's an 02 number, and most likely when you ring that number, it will be a member of our information and intake team that you'll be speaking to. So that person will not be a lawyer, but they will find out about you and the issue that you've got, and just check that our service is able to help you, and then help you make an appointment to speak to the appropriate person at our centre.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Just one last question. How does it work if somebody has communication problems and they have trouble contacting or
Yeah.
phoning?
Yeah. So people can use the telephone interpreter service, and we also, I think, have some. Well, we certainly take calls from supporters of people with disability, who make appointments on behalf of the person with disability. So it might be a family member or a carer of a person with disability who makes the initial contact with our service. About a third of the time it actually is. It might be a professional who's working with the person with disability. So it might be a private lawyer who's seeking to refer the matter to us, or it might be a disability support worker, or a support coordinator, or a social worker, a non-legal disability advocate. So they might be the ones to contact our service and refer the client. So they could expect to be asked information about the client, obviously, and the type of problem, because we would always consider the person with disability to be our client. And wherever possible, we would want the person with disability as our client to be able to participate in the communications with us. And, in most circumstances, it is perfectly possible and appropriate for that person, if they wanted to have support, so to have a support person help them to speak to the lawyer or the other worker at the centre, and to help with their understanding of any advice that they're given, and help them to take any steps that are needed as follow-up. So, those are the sorts of things that get discussed when initial contact is made with our centre. So about a third of the time, it's people with disability themselves who make the initial contact with us. About a third of the time, it's a friend or family member. And about a third of the time, it's a professional who's working with the person with disability. But we just always want to check that, where the person is capable of understanding and participating, that they have consented to the approach to our service and the use of our service, and that they participate in communications with us.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add yourself personally, or you think you
Look,
covered everything?
I think we've covered a lot, but if people do want to find out more about our service, then they're welcome to contact that telephone number that I've given to speak to one of our information and intake officers, because their role is not just intake; it's also to provide information about our services. So if people are wanting more information, then please do contact us, and we can send out information brochures and so on. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We might that in there. Can you just hang on until after the stream ends? Because I just want to have a quick chat with you. Is that all right?
Sure, happy to. That's
Okay.
fine.
Right.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to everyone today.
No, I appreciate you coming along and giving that information. It's it's good information for everyone to have. So, all right, we might end that there. If there's no questions in chat, Chris.
We just had Martin from Blind Citizens Australia wanted the contact details, which we've already provided.
Okay.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, Martin, we've put the contact phone number in the chat, so you should be able to look at that. It should be able to find that with the screen reader. All right, so I might end it there. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining, and thanks, Margot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, just hang on. I'll talk to you in a sec.
Yep.